Megan, sometimes we have a tendency, even as practitioners, to get really focused at a very granular level about a problem or service. We might think in terms of interface or interactions or information design. But sometimes we need to abstract ourselves outward a little bit and think more generally about a circumstance or ways of working, which is why we created the Hopes and Fears template on the back of many that have explored the power of vulnerability and exposing these different challenges, opportunities, and feelings really early on. Before we get into the specific template, Megan, what are some of the lived experiences you've had about the power of exposing what people are anxious about, why they're nervous? Why do we even bother to talk about these things well ahead of designing or organizing information around improving a product or service?
You know, Adam, I think it's important to remember that all of the people on our teams are human beings, right?
We forget sometimes.
It's easy
At least for the foreseeable future.
Right, it's easy to forget that like we are all the same in that way, right? We're all kind of people with feelings, with different things that come up for us. And sometimes when we're starting a new initiative, it's really exciting and possible to like feel very rah-rah about it and want to start from that place. I actually think it's really important to start from this place of vulnerability, like you've said, where we can kind of get everyone's hopes, all the exciting things out onto the table, but also all of the fears and like and the realities that different people might be experiencing so that we can understand those with the same kind of enthusiasm that we understand their hopes.
You know, it's interesting. You're making me think that I've never actually heard an executive inherently start with probability or possibility or risk on average. They're normally trying to persuade or influence with a carrot, a hope, a dream, a North Star. I mean, pick your word. Everything from employee reviews to key performance indicators or KPIs, opportunities, goals, strategies, measures. I mean, pick your acronym. It's all about winning and accomplishing the task. But you're really making me take inventory of this idea of what could be blocking me. And I'm actually reflecting now, early on in my own career, about, you know, my fears about a project are, you know, I don't know enough, or maybe I'm not a fluent enough speaker in the native language of the market I'm operating in, or the regulatory or compliance environment is changing so quickly that I might be creating risk by trying to be innovative as opposed to really managing where I am in this moment. Have you found that it's important to start this at the beginning when we've never worked together, throughout the process, iteratively? Like, do we use this in retrospective? Like, where does hopes and fears really play a role? Should we track it over time?
I tend to use this at the beginning of a project. Okay. More than using it like throughout the project over time. But I could see reasons why it might make sense for a leader to sort of find fixed points in the design process to continue to talk to people about their hopes and their fears. Hey, now that we've learned this, what are your hopes about this? But also, how does this new learning make you afraid? And what are the things about that cause you to have a little bit of reticence to move forward?
Yeah.
Sometimes the things on this chart give us a good idea of where we need to like push into or new problems that we have to solve, but they also might just kind of give us the information that we need as a leader for the people that we need to kind of pull aside and say, hey, I know you're feeling this way. Let's talk about it. Let's understand what's behind that. How do we move this forward?
Yeah, well said. You know, you're making me actually think about steering committee meetings and different milestones. And, you know, at first I was thinking, I'm going to reevaluate hopes and fears when there is a big regulatory or compliance change. But now I'm thinking in terms of, well, there was a merger and acquisition, or there's a product release, or a new competitor comes on the landscape, or somebody else gets promoted, or we leave someone on, you know, on the side, you know, that was already on the team and is now no longer. So now you're making me think that I need to actually plan on these hopes and fears throughout. Okay, well, let's get into our template here. You can see that this is one of our more straightforward templates because it only allows you to take inventory via digital Post-it notes about hopes and fears. But if I zero us in on these hopes and fears, Megan, there's actually a really broad range of what we're seeing here, right? So there's hopes that this app makes it in the top 10 in a store, but then there's also fears that the app is going to be a failure. You know, is it really common to see the mirrored kind of hopes and fears be there, or do we see actually kind of divergence in fears and hopes?
Sometimes you will see that, right? Like that is, it depends on whether people are more kind of like hope thinkers or more fear thinkers. That's the same thing, success or failure, just kind of two sides of that coin, right? So tend to see that happening, but there are also other things on here that I think are different that we might want to look at too, right? So someone says like, I really hope the app works as expected. That's something that we could drive towards and understand. We also have a fear that we won't deliver by our deadline. That
Tell
makes,
me who doesn't fear about that.
Right, but that makes me think of like, okay, that becomes a how might we statement, right?
Okay.
How might we deliver by our deadline? What things do we need to improve about the way that our organization operates in order to have that fear not become a reality?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. You know, the other kind of power tip I've used in the past is I will do hopes and fears, but sometimes I'll change the colors of the Post-it notes for engineering or product or marketing, or I'll flavor the Post-it notes based on the persona or the type of person that I've interviewed or the type of qualification questions that they answered one way or the other. So it can be both an internal tool and also an external tool.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, Megan and I want to thank you for helping us explore such an interesting and important topic. While this is not as multi-stepped or complex as some of the other methods, oftentimes unleashing someone's purpose, passions, and sort of unveiling in a safe space the anxiety or anxiousness you have can actually be a bigger accelerator and a tailwind than having some of the most complex analysis or methods on hand. So don't let this be your ending point. Allow something like this that expresses the need for vulnerability to be at the forefront of building a healthy culture, ultimately manifest inside of your very own exercise. Whether you're doing this hopes and fears inside of a new relationship in your personal life or hopes and fears, of course, in some of more of the professional settings. We just wanted to say thank you, regardless of how many times you've watched this video, around trying these exercises and hopefully giving us some feedback. Megan and I will be really interested to hear your successes and failures, and ultimately that will help dissuade some of our hopes and fears about this kit being adopted. So thank you so much for listening to our video. Good luck with your hopes and fears exercise. And remember, there's certainly no right or wrong answers that we need from you. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.